treating our son, 12M, poorly, and favoring our daughter, 9F, ever since I complimented his cooking. How should I handle this? Family dinners have always been the heart of our home, a symphony of laughter, shared stories, and the comforting aroma of my wife's exquisite Italian cooking. For years, I've admired her culinary prowess, a talent that drew me to her as strongly as the tides are drawn to the moon. Despite my frequent offers to assist her in the kitchen or even take the reins for a night, she always gracefully declined. I can't deny, though, I inherited none of my parents' culinary skills, so I'd sit back, savor each meal with gratitude, and teach our kids to do the same. About a year ago, our son discovered a new passion: cooking. It started innocently enough with him devouring YouTube and TikTok cooking videos between homework and soccer practice. His excitement was contagious, and soon enough, my wife welcomed him into her kitchen kingdom. Twice a week, armed with a new recipe, they'd head to the store, gather ingredients, and return to transform them into something magical. The sight of them cooking side by side, my son's eyes sparkling with curiosity and pride, was a joy like no other. Then, one evening, after another successful dinner experiment, my son's ambition took an unexpected turn. "Mom, can I cook dinner by myself this Saturday?" he asked, eyes wide with hope. The room fell silent, the request hanging in the air. My wife hesitated, torn between pride and apprehension. I could see her internal battle before she finally nodded, albeit reluctantly. Saturday arrived, and so did a new chapter for our family. My wife took him to the store, and soon the kitchen buzzed with activity and the sense of anticipation. She hovered at first, offering advice and guidance, but our son insisted on flying solo. I could sense her unease as she joined me and our daughter in the living room, her expression clouded with mixed emotions. Reassuring her, I said, "He's growing up, loving what you taught him." When the dinner bell rang, we gathered at the table, eager and a bit nervous. To my delight and mild surprise, my son had done an incredible job. Sure, there were a couple of missteps, a tad too much salt here, a bit overcooked there, but it was a genuinely commendable effort. Wanting to bolster his newfound passion, I praised him enthusiastically, offering gentle feedback which I thought would help him improve. My daughter, however, was less generous. "This is too salty," she declared, loudly enough for everyone to hear. I was about to rebuke her when my wife's voice sliced through the room. "She's right, too salty and overcooked." The words hung in the air like a dark cloud and instantly cast a pall over my son's radiant smile. I could see the hurt in his eyes as he deflated before me, his shoulders slumping. My heart sank, but I couldn't find the words. We avoided arguments in front of the kids, and tonight was no exception, yet I couldn't shake off the heavy shadow her criticism had cast over my son's achievement. Later that night, I found him stewing in his room, tears silently marking his cheeks. I comforted him as best as I could, assuring him that his mom's words were more about her own feelings than the food itself. I tried to believe that myself, but knew there was a deeper chasm opening below the surface. After the children were asleep, I confronted my wife. Initially brushing off the incident, she finally admitted that she was hurt by my overt praise for our son. She felt undervalued, believing my compliments for her weren't as enthusiastic. I scoffed involuntarily at the absurdity of the situation. Enraged by my reaction, she lashed out, and we found ourselves in a heated argument, a jarring rarity in our relationship. Eventually, she conceded that she had been too harsh and promised to apologize to our son in the morning. Monday morning came with its usual rush, but a cloud of tension still lingered. My son was unusually quiet during the drive to school, and it wasn't long before his emotions overflowed. Between sobs, he recounted how his mother had told him she'd be cooking alone from now on. Fury coursed through me, but I kept my calm, promising him I would handle it. Dropping him off with a reassuring snack, I grappled with the storm brewing in my heart. That evening, with a simmering resolve, I left work early to confront my wife. Our conversation quickly escalated into a shouting match. Raw emotions spilled out, and the accusations flew. I accused her of being vindictive, manipulating our children to express her anger. She countered by belittling our son's emotions, dismissing them as inconsequential to a man's role, an archaic view I couldn't fathom she held. We ended up in separate rooms, the rift between us widening with each passing minute. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at home grew increasingly toxic. My wife began lavishing our daughter with gifts and attention, almost flaunting her favoritism. Meanwhile, my son became a shadow of his former self, retreating further into his shell with each passing day. I did my best to lift his spirits, taking him on small outings and subtly working on his cooking skills. Yet, I was wary of imitating my wife's divisive tactics and tried to include my daughter, though her gloating only deepened the wounds. Every interaction with my wife felt like treading on eggshells. Each night, I lay in the guest room, thoughts of our once harmonious family haunting my restless sleep. I sought counsel from my parents and brother, who, while sympathetic, didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. "Give it time," they advised, but every day of silence and tension chipped away at my resolve, making me question the foundation of my marriage. The climax came when my wife returned home one evening, arms laden with more gifts for our daughter. I couldn't contain my anger any longer. We clashed fiercely, words sharper than any we'd exchanged before. Our marriage, our family, felt like it was teetering on the edge of an abyss. Each argument only solidified my fear that the life life we'd built together was unraveling, and I was helpless to stop it. As the days dragged on, my wife's indifference towards our son became more blatant. The cold, calculated manner in which she distanced herself from him contrasted starkly with her over-the-top affection for our daughter. The disparity was impossible to ignore, and each time I witnessed it, it felt like a dagger to my heart. Our daughter, sensing the shift in dynamics, leaned into her favored status, further isolating her brother. One particularly harrowing day, after yet another superficial compliment for our daughter's mediocre drawing, I found my son in his room, staring blankly at his untouched homework. The light that cooking had sparked in his eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, lingering sadness. Kneeling beside him, I silently cursed the path our family had taken. In my desperate attempts to provide a semblance of normalcy, I continued to encourage my son's cooking interests discreetly. We would meet in the kitchen late at night or early before sunrise when the house was quiet. He followed my clumsy instructions, a stark contrast to the graceful elegance he once shared with his mom. But each secret lesson felt like a betrayal of the closeness we all once shared. The easy smiles, the laughter echoing through the kitchen, the joy of shared meals. And with each passing day, my hope for reconciliation dimmed. Then came the night when our daughter, emboldened by her mother's favoritism, pushed her brother too far. She taunted him relentlessly during dinner, making cruel jabs about his cooking. My son, on the verge of tears, excused himself from the table. My wife said nothing, her silence a tacit approval. This was the last straw. I decided then and there that enough was enough. As I cleared the dishes, each scrape of cutlery against porcelain felt like a hammer against my nerves. The resolve hardened in my heart. I needed to confront my wife's behavior head-on, no matter the cost. Each moment that passed where she continued to side with our daughter, to alienate our son, felt like another nail in the coffin of our family's unity. Later that night, as the house sank into an uneasy silence, I approached her. She was in our bedroom, scrolling through her phone, seemingly oblivious to the turmoil she'd caused. I stood at the doorway, taking a deep breath to steady myself before stepping inside. "We need to talk," I said, my voice a tense whisper. She looked up, her expression a mix of irritation and indifference. "What is it now?" "This can't go on," I began, clenching my fists to keep my anger in check. "The way you're treating our son is unacceptable. He's hurting, and you're only making it worse." She rolled her eyes, setting her phone down. "Oh, here we go again. You and your precious feelings. Are you really going to accuse me of being a bad mother?" "No," I replied, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm accusing you of playing favorites, of punishing him for something that's not his fault, of poisoning the love and trust in this family." Her eyes narrowed into icy slits. "So now I'm the villain. He needs to toughen up. Life isn't going to coddle him. It's not about toughening up," I countered, frustration bubbling over. "He's a child, and he needs his mother's love, not her rejection. Don't you see what this is doing to him, to all of us?" The argument escalated quickly, words flying back and forth, each one digging deeper wounds. She accused me of undermining her authority, of preferring our son over our daughter. I accused her of being heartless, of letting petty jealousy destroy our family's harmony. Finally, she screamed, "If you care so much about him, why don't you just take him and leave?" The words hung heavy in the air, echoing in both our minds. For a moment, I stood there, stunned by the gravity of her outburst. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I spent the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and confusion. Sleep eluded me as I wrestled with the reality of our fractured family. By morning, I was more determined than ever to protect my son and salvage whatever was left of our family's unity. Resolution, healing, and understanding. The next day, I took a drastic step. I arranged a meeting with a family therapist, hoping that an external perspective could help mend the rift. When I broached the subject with my wife, she was predictably defensive. "I don't need a therapist to tell me how to raise my children," she declared, crossing her arms defiantly. "Maybe we do," I said softly, trying a different approach. "Maybe we've lost touch with each other's needs and feelings. This is tearing us apart, and I'm not willing to lose our family without a fight." Surprisingly, she agreed, albeit reluctantly. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Our first therapy session was tense, filled with a terse recounting of the events that led us there. The therapist, a calm and composed woman named Dr. Harris, listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions that made us both pause and reflect. "What do you feel is the underlying issue here?" Dr. Harris asked, looking directly at my wife. She hesitated, glancing down at her hands. "I feel like I'm being replaced," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "First by our son's sudden interest in cooking, and then by my husband's excessive praise for him. And how does that make you feel?" Dr. Harris prompted gently. "Insecure," my wife confessed, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Like I'm not good enough, like he doesn't need me anymore." Hearing her admit her insecurities was both enlightening and heartbreaking. I realized then that her actions, hurtful as they were, stemmed from a place of fear rather than malice. It was a turning point, an opening for empathy and understanding. Over the next several sessions, we worked through our issues, slowly, painfully, but surely. My wife apologized to our son, acknowledging the hurt she had caused. It was the first step towards repairing their relationship, a small spark of hope amidst the ruins. In one poignant session, our son spoke candidly about his feelings. "Mom, I love cooking because it makes me feel close to you. I never wanted to take your place. I just wanted to be part of your world." His words broke through the emotional walls we had all built, bringing tears to our eyes. My wife hugged him tightly, whispering apologies and promises of change. The road to recovery was long and fraught with setbacks. There were arguments, moments of doubt, and tearful nights. But gradually, we began to find our way back to each other. We established new routines, shared responsibilities, and made a concerted effort to communicate openly. I continued to encourage my son's cooking, with my wife's cautious but growing support. Slowly, she began to join our secret cooking sessions, turning them into family bonding moments once more. The joy that had once filled our kitchen began to return, fragile but resilient. Yet, the wounds were not easily forgotten. Our daughter, having basked in her mother's favoritism, struggled to adjust to the new family dynamic. She acted out, testing boundaries, and often sought attention in disruptive ways. It took patience and understanding to help her feel secure and valued in our newly balanced family life. One evening, as we sat together for dinner, prepared jointly by my wife, son, and myself, I looked around the table and felt a glimmer of the old warmth. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a step in the right direction. We had learned the hard way that family was not about perfection, but about resilience, forgiveness, and unwavering love. Months went by, and while the scars of our ordeal remained, we grew stronger together. The experience had changed us all, making us more aware of each other's vulnerabilities and strengths. We continued therapy, committed to nurturing our fragile peace. Then, one day, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail. It was from a prestigious cooking school, inviting our son to a summer program. "Mom, Dad, look," he exclaimed, waving the letter excitedly. My wife and I exchanged glances, a mixture of pride and anxiety on our faces. This was an opportunity for him to flourish, to follow his passion, but it also meant letting go, trusting him to carve out his own path. As we stood together, reading the letter over his shoulder, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. It was as if we were standing at a crossroads once more, facing the unknown, but united in our support for our son. My wife squeezed my hand, her eyes meeting mine with a silent question. I nodded, smiling through the bittersweet emotion welling up inside me. It was a new chapter, full of possibilities and uncertainties. We all sat down at the table, discussing the logistics, the excitement, and the inevitable fears that came with such a big step. Our daughter, sensing the importance of the moment, joined in with genuine enthusiasm, her earlier resentment slowly giving way to sibling pride. The decision was made. Our son would attend the summer program. As the weeks passed, we prepared for his departure, each of us dealing with our emotions in our own way. My wife and I found solace in our newfound understanding, drawing strength from the progress we had made as a family. Finally, the day arrived. We drove him to the airport, his suitcase packed with essentials and his heart brimming with dreams. Standing at the departure gate, I hugged him tightly, whispering words of encouragement and love. My wife did the same, her tears mingling with her smiles. As the plane took off, we watched until it disappeared from sight. Turning to leave, we held hands, a united front against the challenges that lay ahead. It was an open-ended journey, our family story continuing to unfold with each passing day. We drove home in silence, each lost in our thoughts. There was an unspoken understanding that this was just the beginning of a new phase in our lives. The months of turmoil and healing had taught us that family was an evolving entity, constantly changing and growing. When we arrived home, our daughter ran to her room, her footsteps echoing through the quiet house. My wife and I stood in the kitchen, the heart of our home, and took a moment to appreciate how far we had come. The air was thick with memories, both painful and joyful. "I think we'll be okay," I said softly, breaking the silence. She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and determination. "Yes, we will." And with that, we set about making dinner, side by side, creating new memories and forging a path forward together.